Hello class, and welcome to this week. We are hitting Unit 2, which is reading and writing essays, and this is going to be split into two parts, where this week we're going to be hitting chapters 7, 8, and 9, and next week we'll be doing 10, 11, and 12. But there's going to be overlap between all of them, so even though it seems like that there are a lot of slides for this week, if you take all three chapters into account, there's somewhere in the 80s. It's not as bad as it seems because a lot of them are looking at the same concepts as we will see. So today we're going to be looking at exemplification essays, narrative essays, and cause and effect essays. For all these chapters, you're going to be reading examples in your textbook, and then you're going to be analyzing an example essay, and then on your own, you're going to be practicing one. Your narrative essay is the one that we're actually doing in class for a grade. But you do need practice with all of these, and it's good to know all of them. So let's go on and get to it. So you may have not heard the word exemplification before. You may have heard to exemplify something, which is kind of just means to show it. And here's a little tip for you when you are looking up words. So if we just look up exemplification, which is not the root word, we may find that the definition is not very useful. So it says the act or process of exemplifying, but we may not know what exemplifying means. However, if we go to the synonyms, we see that there's things like example, illustration, prototype, specimen, sample, and we may know some of these words. And so what is an exemplification essay exactly? Well, it provides examples of something. So it's a type of expository essay. Expository just means you're explaining something. In this case, you are explaining something by using examples of whatever concept it is that you're going to be elaborating on. So you are essentially educating someone in this. You have a thesis statement of whatever claim it is that you have, and then you're supporting it with evidence. That's all an exemplification essay is. And remember back in chapter 1, there was this thing called test. Some of you posted about it on the message board saying that that's what you kind of liked learning about chapter 1 and you wanted to use more. Well, here in the next couple chapters is going to come up. So don't forget that in active reading, you're going to be, for all of these essays, going to be using tests. So you're going to be looking at the thesis. It's especially important for an exemplification essay because it tells you what concepts that you're trying to explain is. And then you're going to be looking at the evidence, so what each body paragraph is about. And then finally, you're going to be looking for some sort of summation or summary, which reinforces and elaborates on how all those ideas fit together. And finally, you're going to be looking for transitions. And so back in chapter 1, this one kind of was vague, but transition words for the type of essays we're going to find out are a good way of identifying what the essay style even is. So, speaking of which, for exemplification essays, remember we are explaining something using examples. So if we're saying something like for example or for instance, it's a good chance that we have an exemplification essay. Words that add on, like an example, in addition, furthermore, next, also, those are all key words to show us or tell us that we are elaborating on an idea. If we saw something like but or in contrast or however or although, all of those are signals for comparison, not for elaboration. And so they would tell you, oh, that's a different type of essay, and we'll see those in the future. So the key words here for an exemplification essay is how are we adding on to our examples or to our thesis. Each body paragraph, an exemplification essay, can either be its own example that's supporting the thesis. So maybe if you had a 5-paragraph essay where you have an introduction, 3 bodies, and a conclusion, you have 3 specific examples. That's one way that you can do it. But you can also just have one really good example, and it takes you 3 paragraphs to really break down that example. Both of those are perfectly fine. Your examples need to be arranged in some sort of order. That can be time, it could be location, it could be of importance, but there needs to be some thought in the order of it. Usually you lead with your worst evidence or your most general evidence, and then you wait and you give the hardest hitting evidence and the clearest towards the end of the essay, so that you leave your readers with a strong feeling that you know what you're talking about and that you have really, really made them believe whatever it is that you're saying. So in your textbook, there is an essay there in defense of the small town library, and I've also provided a link here that should work for you if for whatever reason you're having issues with your textbook. And I want you to use the active reading strategies all the way from chapter 1 to really think about this. So remember, you're looking at things like the title, you're looking at things like, okay, what do you think this is going to be about, to activate your prior knowledge if you've ever been to a small town or ever been to a library. We have the word defense there. So you need to be thinking about, okay, why are we having to defend the library? What may make you think that it's about. Then you need to annotate for test. So remember, you're looking for some sort of thesis statement. You're figuring out what exactly the examples are. You're looking for that summary, and you're looking for those transition words. Had you not been told this was an exemplification essay, you should have been able to figure it out by doing this process right here. Finally, if you want extra practice, there are questions to answer, and then a response that you can provide as well. So there are some questions for analysis and for annotating, and it's focusing on reading, meaning, strategy, language and style, pattern, and critical thinking. And all of these come up in all of the chapters about different kinds of essays. So we're going to be seeing these a lot. So we're going to take it slow through this first one for exemplification essays. And as they come up later, I'm going to kind of speed through them because it will be kind of redundant at that point. So what's it mean to focus on reading? Well, it means all of those active reading strategies that we've talked about in the past. Does she have all the test elements? If not, is there a reason for it? And if so, what needs to be added? Remember that we're not looking at some sort of perfect thing, that a lot of these are student essays, and so they may be imperfect. And part of your job as a reader is to assess quality. You're not just simply reading for pleasure here. You're analyzing as you go through it. So when it says focus on reading, it means to have in the back of your mind that you're looking for these things like the thesis while you're actually reading. And so that when you get to it, your brain can go, aha, there's the thesis. Right? And then after you've read it and you've looked for the test elements, then you can talk about what did it actually mean. What was the author actually saying about libraries? Specifically, in this case, we have a reduction. Some people don't think we need libraries anymore because of technology. At least that is our author's argument. Do you agree with our author's argument that that's what some people do? And then, in this case, in small towns, they serve a different function than a big city, for example. Okay, Next, you would be focusing on strategy. So this is where we're stepping outside. We now know like what it was about. And now we're looking at how they went about it. So we had an author here who had a goal in mind. And that's what we need to think about. We need to think about what was the author's goal. And in this case, the author's goal is clearly in favor of these libraries, that they want to be convincing to their audience that a small town library is the place to be and that they have merit, and they're going to give examples for that. Remember, we said that there are different ways in which to organize an essay. Was there a clear order? If you had to take a guess for why the author decided to make each paragraph what it was, would you be able to figure that out or not? Then, after you say, oh yeah, I think that this is why, you need to look at, okay, well, if the author did that, what was good about it or what was bad about it? Would you do the same thing, or did the author do a good job convincing the reader? Because remember, ultimately, in cases like this where the author wants you to believe something, it's all about manipulating, to some extent, the reader to believe what they want you to believe. As part of that, it's very important each word that the author uses and how they use them. Vocabulary is a very powerful thing. So we've talked about denotation and connotation before. And the idea is that even if you have two words that seem to mean the same thing, each word carries with it a unique feeling to it. It's kind of like the difference between tall and gigantic. One has a stronger meaning behind it, and it's a risk to use because gigantic, although it's a stronger word, can also seem like you're over exaggerating. And so depending on the tone of what you want it to be, do you want to come off as exaggerating or not? And sometimes you want to make it seem bigger than life. And then other times you just want it to be tall. You just want to be factual. You want to play it straight. It's just the same thing here. So we have these words irrelevance and nostalgia. Irrelevance is a very strong word as well because it means something doesn't matter. But the idea is like it doesn't matter because it's not important. It's the feeling behind it. But then nostalgia, on the other hand, is having a good feeling about the past. It's all about language, and just changing a few words can have a huge change in the outcome. And it's worth looking at the words that are doing a lot of heavy lifting. So in this case, they have identified irrelevant, nostalgia, and shared as words that are doing a lot of heavy lifting, whether the author even realizes or not, because that's the other thing. When we're analyzing this, the author may have not intentionally thought, oh, shared is a better word than X, Y, or Z. But they still intended on using it. It's still there, and we can say, oh, this is how it's successful, or this is how it's impeding what the author wants to do. Then we have a pattern. Remember, patterns can bleed into what we were talking about before about strategy, about the order of examples and that sort of thing. But pattern can just also be the overall structure of the essay. So did they give 3 separate examples? Did they give one and break it into parts? Is it like telling a story? Is it just very cut and dry? Are all paragraphs kind of mirrored in some way where all the sentences roles are in the same order and it's very clear what each of them are? It's worth looking at all of that as well. And then finally, you're going to focus on critical thinking. So critical thinking is where you are drawing conclusions, you're making inferences, and you're really deciding, you're making a judgment about whether you agree or disagree with the author. So essentially, you're saying, oh, okay, after analyzing the language and the structure and everything else, was the author convincing and successful, or was this ultimately weak? Additionally, you can take the point and run with it more. So maybe you think that the author's assessment of the small town library was accurate, but now you as the reader can apply that same lens through libraries in general. Like, we live in a large city, right? Houston. Does that same idea about small town libraries extend to the libraries in Houston? If so, then this author did an excellent job, but maybe they framed things incorrectly because they could have framed it as libraries in general and captured more audience. But if not, then maybe the author was pinpointing exactly what it needed to be aimed at, so just small towns. Okay, so now that we have kind of gone through one about libraries, there's another one, and this is all about looking at the structure. So this is also in the textbook. I don't have a link for you on this one. And then you should go through the active reading process again. And really, if you want to take this to its conclusion, you read this and then think about it while you're taking a walk around. It can be campus or it can be someplace else. And really keep in mind the meaning of making a difference. So we're kind of a satellite campus where we're at, right? We're not a full-fledged campus, but I think you could transform this even. So what steps can individual students take to make our campus a better place? You can do this even if you were going into Walmart or something like that, right? What steps can individuals make to make our city a better place? And it's all about the small things that people can do. You're really taking their ideas and you're saying, hey, did they do a good job, and how is this applicable in a larger way? Okay, so as part of that, there's an essay map, and really it's just an essay map. Remember when you wrote your outlines for me? An essay map is the same idea. It's just taking an essay that's already been written and splitting it back apart. When you're analyzing things, it's a good idea to do this because it allows you then to make overall notes, right? You're essentially taking the main idea of each of the 3 body paragraphs, and then you're deciding whether it was a good idea or not. So just like we were talking about with the library, you would do it the same here. There are some guiding questions here that we can ponder with this, like, was the thesis statement effective in capturing the entire idea behind what our author, Allison, was trying to say? And does it preview the structure of the essay? Because a thesis statement often will, and that can play to its strength with readers. Were each body paragraphs, were they fleshed out, or did some need more examples? Or maybe they had too many because they were off topic or not very strong. Were they structured correctly, or was there an issue with the order? And then overall, what was its greatest strength and its greatest weakness? Even the best of writing out there, there are criticisms that can be made about them. Maybe you wanted more of a story or an essay, or maybe it overstays its welcome slightly. Writing is one of those processes that you're constantly able to improve and refine, and sometimes you even end up with 2 different stories or essays at the end of editing, and both of them are valid. Like, maybe in this case, You have one that really, really hits the point, selling it to people in general in society through editing, and maybe there's one specifically about college students or students in general. Okay, so to kind of recap on some of this, the wording of an assignment tells you or suggests whether it's going to be exemplification, right? It's telling you to give examples about something or illustrate why something is. And then you can go through the same process that you normally would with our writing, where you develop the outline, a topic, the thesis, and everything else that way. So here are some example prompts, like should children be taught only in their native language or in English as well, and why? Your thesis is going to take a position on that, and then they're going to have examples. So an example thesis here, the success of students in bilingual third grade class suggests the value of teaching elementary school students in English as well as their native language. This is probably not a full thesis statement because we're kind of missing previews of what maybe the entire essay is going to be about, but it's certainly answering the prompt. And these other two examples kind of do the same thing. Discuss the worst job you've ever had, including plenty of specific examples. So there you go. Exemplification. Though this one is kind of narrative based because it's about someone's life. And someone says, oh, it was a fast food restaurant. And then they have 3 reasons: endless stream of rude customers, boring tasks, managers, insensitivity. So this is a great example here of one that really shows its structure. You see that it's going to be a 5-paragraph essay. And this is probably the strongest thesis in terms of communicating with the reader what the essay is going to be about. Remember that you're always going to test your own essays as well to make sure that you're hitting all of those parts. Does it have a thesis statement? Is there good evidence? Did you sum everything up together? And are there transitions that are appropriate to signaling to the reader of what kind of essay it is? We have an example. So we have a student named Kyle Sims, and these are the steps that Kyle Sims took when writing an essay. So they did free writing, which is just brainstorming, kind of in general. They're just kind of jotting down whatever comes to their mind. I know brainstorming is down here as well, but it's kind of like you're doing the same thing in both spots. But they're just putting anything down on the page. They're not limiting themselves here in free writing. Then they pick something and come up with a thesis statement, and then they brainstorm to come up with their ideas. What are their 3 points going to be, for example? They bang out the entire rough draft, so they do exactly how we did, where you create your body paragraphs, your introduction, your conclusion, and then you have your draft. You test it. You add some transitions in there, make sure that they're good. Revise it for ideas. You edit and proofread it for things like grammar, mechanics, whatever format you want, and then you retest it to see how it goes. This seems like a lot of steps, but a lot of them can happen in a short amount of time. For example, free writing through brainstorming can be something that happens in just 5 minutes if you really were on it. And similarly, you're probably going to be revising, editing, and proofreading in 1 or 2 sessions. Oftentimes, it's best to revise on its own and then come back and edit, proofread that, or do it multiple times. Sometimes you just miss things. But ultimately, it's not as harrowing as all of these steps, but making it a checklist makes sure that you don't overlook anything and that you follow a good strategy rather than just sitting there and writing. Okay, so we can read Kyle's essay and then see how everything worked out for him. So you're essentially going to be testing this on your own. This is just breaking it down into parts. And then you're saying, okay, was it effective or not? What would you do differently? We talked about transition words before. Here's a little bit of help with commas. So with those transition words at the beginning of a sentence, like in addition, finally, if we read the sentence, we can even hear the pause. In addition, extreme sports are very difficult. This is extraneous or extra information because if we took off in addition, extreme sports are very difficult, we still have a complete sentence that sounds great. When we have those extra little bits at the start, we offset them from the main clause using a comma. This is called an introductory clause, by the way. The first, in addition, finally, and they can even be longer than that. We could say, in addition to being very expensive, comma, extreme sports are very difficult. So it doesn't just have to be a single word or two words. We could have an entire phrase or clause there. Right? So to review, you're just going to kind of take those same ideas from chapter 1. You're just applying them to a specific type of essay, which is exemplification, which is giving examples. These are often styles of essays that you may have to write in college. Okay, so we're going to go through now narrative essays. I'm going to kind of zoom through this one a little bit because you're going to see that a lot of these slides are very similar to the ones we just went through. The difference is instead of giving examples, we're telling a story. Does it have to be true? No, it can be fictional. Okay, something can be narrative from someone's point of view and definitely be fictional. The other thing is, like, let's say that we're writing an autobiography, so that's a biography about ourselves, or a memoir where you're taking specific events and it's not your entire life. Has anyone ever lied in those? The answer to that is yes. So fiction definitely can come up in these. You may have realistically lied in your narrative essay. I'm going to be real honest. As long as you weren't saying that aliens abducted you or something crazy like that, then I am going to just trust that you are telling me the truth because I have no reason as the reader to doubt you. Now, I assume that the series of events that you're going to tell me are important in some way, shape, or form. That's why you would see things like experiences that shaped you as a person or important people. They typically are going to be in chronological order from beginning to end unless there's a reason for it to be something else. Like, for example, sometimes maybe there's a murder mystery or something, and we start after the murder and then we go back to the beginning at some point once we have some more knowledge and we get to see what happened to actually cause the murder. But it's all around a particular outcome. You're going to do the same thing, though. You're going to use test in just the same way. Some transitional words are going to be the same, so like first, but you see it's a little different this time. It's at first as well. So these tend to be more time-oriented, next, now, soon, then, but they all signal that we're talking about order of events occurring, which tells us that, oh, there may be something in here about narration. Your body paragraphs are, instead of examples, they're going to be events. So you're going to introduce something as your thesis, and then you are breaking it down into component parts. We'll see this in the Sanctuary of School, and it's a narrative essay about the writer's childhood. And here is another place where you can see it. And a little tip for you for your active reading: if you know that you're going to have questions that are paired with reading, it's a good idea to read them before you read the essay because it primes you for what to look for. Once again, you're going to have an essay map. You'll see that it's set up in the same type of structure. Instead of examples, though, it's going to be an event instead that counts as the evidence. So just like before with our exemplification essay about libraries, we're looking at words on the page that may affect our reading. So we're going to go through those same steps. We're going to go through reading, meaning, strategy, language, and style and pattern. And so sanctuary has a lot of weight to it. So think about what it means and why it may be used. Think about who the people are in here and go ahead and test the essay. And then figure it out, like what's the point of sharing all of this in terms of the meaning? Like, is there an extra layer to what's going on, or is this just a series of events? After figuring out what it is that you think the author is trying to like get at, then think about their strategy. Who are they making their primary audience? And if they have something that they want you to believe or to accept, are they stating that outright, or are they hinting at it and wanting you to just kind of take it on and it to come up almost as your own idea in your brain? Maybe it didn't work that well for you. Maybe you wish that they had come out and said it. It's a very tough thing to balance this, because you don't want to treat your readers like they're stupid. But at the same time, if you don't make things very clear, then some people just are going to leave confused or may come away with the wrong idea. We talked about sanctuary before. And the first time, the question was more like the definition. But sanctuary has a lot of weight to it. And by weight, I mean feeling behind it. That there's a kind of a reverence to it. There's a holiness to the word sanctuary. It's not just about, oh, this is like a safety, but it's like, oh, I can't be harmed by evil in sanctuary. There's a godliness to it, and in fact, part of some churches are called sanctuaries, right? And that's worth keeping in mind with this. Think about the patterns. How were the events actually put into order? Could they have been reordered? Would that have helped or hurt it? These are things to think about. And then finally, with critical thinking, you're going to think that, is this just a story that we're supposed to not really walk away with feeling anything? Or is there another layer there that we're supposed to be convinced of something or persuaded about something? They make the point to tell you that this was originally published in a newspaper with a general audience. But that doesn't mean that it can't be targeted towards a specific audience. It's worth thinking about how the story might have been written differently had it been tailored towards a publication with a very specific audience in mind. Okay, so you're going to now go through kind of a similar thing. That was professional. Now we're going to a student one. So this one is going to be a little bit rougher, just like we were looking at these exemplification essay. You're going to do the same thing where you go through the active reading process and you're going to fill out the essay map, kind of like an outline. You can just do it on a sheet of paper or anything like that. And you're really just going through the same things we just did, where you're saying, was each part effective? Was how they structured it effective? Was their audience effective? Did they need more examples? Was it clear what their point was with this? Or maybe it wasn't. So all of that is important. If you're being asked to write a narrative essay, which hint, hint, you are probably being told to give some sort of recount or tell me about a time in which, A lot of everyday writing tasks call for narration. If you've ever had to write a statement about something, like maybe while you were in school you got in trouble, or someone you knew got in trouble, or maybe as an adult you did, maybe you were a victim of a crime and the police ask you to write a statement, you're essentially writing a narrative essay. You're writing exactly what happened. Maybe you're applying for a job and you need a letter with that. You're writing some kind of narrative essay as well sometimes. So here are some examples. Tell about a time where you had to show courage, or trace the development of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. So here's one about yourself, and here's one that's about history. Both same type of essay though in the end. You still test them just the same way. Here's some great criteria to make it a little more specific to a narrative essay. And we're going to follow a student who has to write one. So this should feel very close to your own hearts. Write about a milestone in your life. Okay, so this particular student kept a journal, and they decided to go back rereading their journal entries. I think what's more likely for you guys today would be to start looking at maybe your phone and the history in your phone, like maybe you have photos or stories or whatever, and you can start looking over your own life, and you'll hit a section of your life where you go, oh yeah, I remember that, and you'll have something to write about. You can then order events, think about your transitions, create a thesis statement, revise, edit, proofread, all of that good stuff. So now that a student did that, you can analyze how they did it just the same. And then you could say, hey, this is what the student did good and this is what the student did bad. Of all the essays this week, this is the one I really advise you to do more than any of the others, because it will help you. I know we're just writing our conclusions right now for our essays, or somewhere about there, but you'll be editing them before you know it, and you'll be having to do all of these things. Hey, here's a little more grammar for you. And something to worth noting is that it's very common for you guys to make the mistake of fusing sentences together or creating comma splices. So that's a run-on. It's where you have two complete sentences and you're trying to tell a story, and you think that they have something to do with each other, and they might, but you don't give them the conjunction to go with it, or you don't split them into separate sentences. So we have this: as the big day approached, my family kept teasing me about it. My sister kept asking me if I felt any different. I can see that we have three sections to this sentence, right? We have as the big day approached, and then from my to it, and then my to different. If we look at as the big day approached, we can see that that is not a complete sentence. If I just came up to you and I said, as the big day approached, you would just stare at me and you'd be waiting for me to say more. But if I said, as the big day approached, my family kept teasing me about it, and then I stopped, that is a complete sentence. You may not know what it is, but other than that, it's a full, complete sentence. If we keep going, my sister kept asking me if I felt any different. That is also a full, complete sentence. So that means that I need to fix it and treat them like such. A comma alone is not strong enough to hold two complete sentences together. We can change it with a period. We can make this into a semicolon, or we could add a conjunction, like a fanboy, for, and, nor, but, so, all those. Yet. Okay, so this is kind of the same thing, same review. Remember, follow your active reading, always test your essays, and looking at student work can help you too. We have one more that we're going to talk about this week. We're going to zoom through it again because it's going to be following the same structure, and these are cause and effect essays. So what's a cause and what's an effect? A cause is something that makes an event happen. An effect is what actually happens. Something worth knowing is what's the difference between effect and effect. Effect is a thing. Affect is a verb or an action. Okay, so if I am hitting someone in the head, I am affecting, with an A, their ability to think. I'm doing an action to them. The effect of me hitting them in the head is that they can't think. That is a thing. The thing that happens because I hit them is that they can't think. That's effect. So some general causes and effects there, like weight gain, health problems, seatbelt laws, traffic deaths reduced, cause effect. When you are writing a cause and effect essay, it's a great idea to list out all possible causes for something, even if you're not going to write about it. Not just the obvious ones, because you may come up with something else that's very good. Sometimes you have more than one thing where it's not just a singular cause, but it's like a chain reaction. A cause that creates an effect, and that effect causes something else to happen, and so on and so forth. A cause and effect essay can look at either a singular cause and effect, or they can look at chains, or they can try to predict events. Sometimes they're there to help us understand why, and sometimes they're there to help us understand how. You're still going to test them. You're still going to see whether everything's there, whether it's focusing on causes mostly, effects mostly, whether it goes back and forth, and what it is that the author actually wants from us. Transitions are very important, and you'll see that unlike the first two, these have a lot of specific vocabulary which really tip us off, like cause and effect. But consequently or because, those are very important ones for cause and effect. Because is a great one, because it shows cause and effect straight up. So depending on structure, you could either have specific causes or effects as paragraphs, or you could be doing it by ideas and talking about multiple causes and effects within each paragraph, or a chain reaction type deal, as we were saying before. Okay, your essay map is going to look just the same as the other ones. You're going to have a thesis in your introduction. You're going to have some sort of causes or effects, and then some sort of summary. And remember, just like before, we're going from least important to most important. Here is an essay, The Seat Not Taken. And we're thinking about where Riders is talking about the seat beside him on the train and why it may be empty. So there's a link for you as well. And you're going to go through it. This particular author, it's good to know about him. So he is a very famous author, won a lot of awards for fiction and things like that. But this is an opinion. And him just kind of musing about how he rides a train every week, and that oftentimes no one sits next to him, and so he thinks about why that might be. You're going to go through that same active reading process, same one as before. You're going to test it, you're going to think about all the stuff you know about it beforehand, all that good stuff. And then we're going to go through the reading, meaning, strategy, language and style, pattern, critical thinking, just like we did before. So the meaning of it, what do all the words actually say that? So Casual sociological experiment. Oh my, that sounds difficult until we start breaking it down. Casual is the opposite of formal. So we're saying like not official. We're saying just kind of a random, he's just thinking about it. Sociological, we have the word social in there. So we're talking about between people. So an unofficial between people experiment. And he sees an empty seat beside him as sad but also dangerous. Do you think he's overreacting? Do you think he's overreacting just for the audience? Why do you think that may be? And then that question I just asked kind of gets into the strategy. Was he trying to change someone's minds or their behavior? Or is he just trying to entertain us? Or is he trying to warn us about something? And how do you know that that's his goal? And does he actually accomplish it? Because there's a little bit of silliness to this particular essay, this cause and effect essay. How do we know that? Well, look at his specific language and style. So he uses a lot of, I don't want to say big words, but he uses a lot of very precise language and adjectives. He calls people affluent, which means rich, educated, sophisticated, enlightened. And is that supposed to be tongue-in-cheek, or is he being serious? It's worth thinking about. Think about the order of the paragraphs and how he actually puts them in order and why he does that. And then finally, for the critical thinking, we're thinking about where we are in history, what his views are, what's he actually saying about the world, or more specifically, America. Here are some questions to kind of guide you on that process. We're going to do the same thing now with a student essay. There is one in here for you. And you'll do the same thing, right? We're going to break it down back into its component parts. And you're going to look for specific words and the thesis and everything that prove to us it's the cause and effect essay. Remember that there are words that tell us or tip us off that cause and effect essays are going to be the case. So even when you get a prompt from a teacher, when we're saying, or when we're explaining why something happened, any sort of why or prediction of it, that's really just cause and effect. So most history classes are going to be asking cause and effect essays. Why did this happen in history? So here you go, a women's studies class. What factors contributed? Cause and effects. Discuss the possible long-term effects of smoking. The word effect is right in there. How has the internet affected the lives of those who've grown up with it? We're saying, well, what effects exist about something? So that's also cause and effects. Remember that when you're pre-writing, you're going to look at everything first, and then you're going to be saying, oh, I think that these are our really big ones to consider, especially when you have to consider your purpose, because it might be a little bit different than just what you come up with. And sometimes your causes can be lumped together, or sometimes it gives you an idea about structure, about whether you want to write in terms of each individual cause, or maybe you're lumping things together. Of course, you test your own essays. And so let's see how a student actually does that. How my parents' separation changed my life. And before she starts writing it, she talks to her siblings to see what they remember. So she's doing kind of research here. She took notes. And then she knew it was going to be cause and effect. So she decided to write her thesis statement using the language of the prompt, always a good thing to do. And she looked at what transition words made it clear to her audience that she was going to write cause and effect. A summary statement for cause and effect should really be looking at that end result and tying everything together. And then, of course, she'll test it, revise, and then test one more time to make sure everything's good. One last thing is that this particular essay, since it's about themselves, they have a lot of contractions like didn't, won't, and informal writing, especially in academic writing in college, you do not use those. You split the words apart. It's almost like using slang. You're not going to say y'all in your essay. And similarly, you don't say didn't. You would say did not. So, worth noting, your writing, you need to stop doing that. It's a hard habit to kick, along with you. You shouldn't be using you in your writing either. But it's worth noting. Okay, so look to see whether this student was effective or not, and review the transitional words, and really just evaluate, did Andrea do a good job in her essay? If you had to write it, what would you do differently? Remember one last thing, affect versus effect. How I always remember it is affect starts with A, and so does action. And a verb is just an action word. So affect, action, effect is just a thing. But affect, action. Okay, you will go through the same process just like the other ones. You test, you analyze, you write one, you test, all those good things again. Okay, so I know it was a little bit longer this week, but it was the same kind of concepts again. It's really worth going through these and seeing what's similar about all of them. And I really encourage you to look at all the transitional words because they'll help you tell the difference between everything. You're about halfway through the course at this point, so I congratulate you for that. Keep working hard, and I will see you next time.